Frenzy stacking in Path of Exile 2 is not only possible, but results in absurd clear and single target damage. Hey, I'm Cyclon, and today I want to share with you my version of a Spiral Volley and Snipe Frenzy charge stacking Deadeye. Now, before we're going to get into the guide, there are a few things I need to quickly mention. This variation to the build is focusing on mapping and rarity. It is an evasion based build, it will die, it is not immortal, the defensive is really just enough lives that it doesn't get one-shot by normal attacks, and then as much evasion rating as possible and acrobatics to try and evade as many things as possible, and then relies on kill enemies before they kill you, or at least pin them so they don't get closer to you. And this is all the survivability of this build is made out of. Now, the other thing is that I had this build mostly figured out that it felt decent, but it missed that really amazing. And I found two Spiral Volley build guides, one from PoE2 and one from Helix, I don't actually know how his name is supposed to be pronounced, that used variations to the build that one PoE2 solved the single target and Spiral Volleys solved the clear really well. And I used both their concepts in this build and just added on top of it that I scaled rarity and I kept the investment as low as possible. That out of the way, let's take a look at my version of this build. So, we are utilizing frenzy charges. For frenzy charges, we need the Deadeye Ascendancy. The reason we want to use frenzy charges is that both Spiral Volley and Barrage can utilize it to do crazy things, and I get to those in a moment. First, we're gonna look at why frenzy, what we get from the Ascendancy, then how we generate frenzy charges, and then we look at our Snipe and Spiral Volley. So we gain 7 frenzy charges from the tree: Frenetic, Savagery, and Fervor. We then can get an 8th frenzy charge from the corrupted gloves. So we get our unique gloves and we corrupt them for +1 maximum frenzy charge. This sets us up at 8 frenzy charges. We then use Avidity and Thrilling Chase to have our frenzy quality of life, basically. Avidity means that when we gain a frenzy charge, 30% chance that we gain all our frenzy charges. This heavily helps in maps and it decreases the downtime or the setup time we have on big pinnacle bosses. Then on Thrilling Chase, it means that basically half the time we have double the frenzy charges. So if we consume 4 frenzy charges, or in our case we can consume up to 8, so let's say 8 frenzy charges, these 8 frenzy charges have a 50% chance to count as 16 frenzy charges. And with those 16 frenzy charges, we have all the coverage or all the damage. So this is, when we high roll it, it's absolutely nuts. Now, this means that we already have a solid pick on the Deadeye, and we get basically Tailwind for free on top, because we need the frenzy charge. We're choosing Deadeye because of that, and that means Tailwind is just a really amazing additional bonus that the Ascendancy has, giving us evasion rating, which is great for our survivability, skill speed, which the more skill speed we have, the faster we can charge Snipe, and with Windward we have the less damage taken, which is a great additional survivability layer, which we desperately need on this build. And also, of course, we gain movement speed, which is always great to have. We want to run maps fast. After all, our main goal is to clear breaches and get as much currency as possible by gaining some rarity. Now, with that said, I've made a very detailed written guide. You can find it as usual in the pinned comment and in the description. If there's anything missing in the written guide or in the video, feel free to ask in the comment section or on Discord. I will try to answer as quick as possible and add it to the written guide if needed. So we now have our frenzy charges. How do we generate them? One way is Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark gives us a frenzy charge whenever we crit. So what we can do is we apply Sniper's Mark, and then we perfectly time our snipe, and with the perfectly timed snipe we guarantee the crit, and the guaranteed crit gives us our frenzy charge. Then we need to repeat this till we proc Avidity, or we have done this 8 times, so we had 8 frenzy charges and we can do all our damage. Now, we can't do this during maps. So for clear, we are instead utilizing Combat Frenzy. Combat Frenzy gives us a frenzy charge whenever we freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy. This can only happen once per 1.7 seconds. We are using a level 18. I haven't seen level 19 or 20 spirit gems yet. Maybe it's a statement about how much I have played or the type of content I've played, but leave it at that. Combat Frenzy at level 18, 1.73 seconds, but we cannot freeze or electrocute, as Spiral Volley, our main skill for mapping, doesn't have an innate damage conversion. Instead, we utilize pin support. With pin support, we now actually can pin enemies with our Spiral Volley, which then in turn generates our frenzy charges. And this is how we generate the frenzy charges during the map. Now with this, we have our frenzy generation. Now why do we even want frenzy charges? Why are they so powerful? And for that we take a look at Spiral Volley and Barrage. Snipe itself doesn't interact with frenzy charges, but it heavily benefits from using the barrage buff. Now, Spiral Volley first. Spiral Volley interacts with frenzy charges in 3 ways. If we consume any frenzy charges, we do 100% more damage. So even if it's just one frenzy charge, we already have a baseline of 100% more damage. We then can scale this up. And for each frenzy charge consumed, we gain another 20% more damage and 1 additional chain. So, if we have 8 frenzy charges, we have 160% more damage and 8 chains. If our Thrilling Chase procs, we have technically consumed 16 frenzy charges and 16 chains. So this means 320% more damage and 16 chains. So this is up to 420% more damage and 16 chains, meaning that this can cover the entire screen and more. But to do that, we do need some projectile speed. Projectile speed means that the projectile can travel a further distance before it vanishes, or it lands on the ground and does nothing anymore. So the more projectile speed we have, the more time we give the projectiles to go from enemy A to enemy B to enemy C and so on. And this means that we actually can utilize all those chains. And with this, we just hit the entire screen and everything gets damaged. Now this is not quite enough to fully clear every screen of enemies we see. It's getting very close, but it's not quite there. To further enhance our clear, we're using the Pulse Circle Ring and a Herald of Ice. So what's happening is we are supporting Spiral Volley not just by pin, but also by cold infusion. By supporting it with cold infusion, we gain access to cold damage. It's not enough to freeze, but it is enough to chill. As long as we don't run a map where we give enemies increased elemental ailment threshold. Once we chill the enemy, the Pulse Circle Ring will shatter the enemy upon a kill, and a shattered enemy will trigger Herald of Ice. The Herald of Ice doesn't care if the enemy is frozen, just that the enemy gets shattered. And once the enemy is shattered, well, now we are applying our Herald of Ice, which causes an explosion. We're scaling the AoE of the damage of the explosion, and this Herald of Ice now actually converts our physical damage to cold damage. So this one can chill, it can freeze, but it can chill. So it chills enemy, the enemy gets shattered because it chilled, and then we cause another explosion, and this means that combined with the amount of chain and projectiles of Spiral Volley and the amount of explosions with Herald of Ice, we can clear screens and screens of enemies. Now this has the small caveat of rares. We can't fully clear rares that well, because if the Spiral Volley doesn't get buffed, doesn't hit the rare, it doesn't do enough damage, we don't trigger the explosions. Sometimes rare just survive. Maybe with a little bit of HP, maybe with a bit more. There we can either just fire 1 or 2 more Spiral Volleys near the enemy, or we just quickly stand if there's nothing else around us and charge a single snipe and kill the enemy. Normally we don't need to buff the snipe a lot if the enemy is already on low life. The snipe itself already does a lot of damage. And this is how we then clear our maps and mostly our breaches. Now, all other skills outside of Wind Dancer, which is just there for survivability, are working towards our single target. So Snipe itself, let's introduce that first. Snipe itself is a channeling skill, and if perfectly timed, it will cause a perfectly crit arrow. So this perfectly timed arrow, which then guarantees a crit and has an enhanced crit multi already from the gem. So now we have a guaranteed crit which deals a lot of crit damage. We can further enhance this. We have a few ways to scale this up. First of all, during a map, by Sniper's Mark, we get another crit damage bonus for this crit. And then we can use Bone Storm, which we want to scale the gem level as high as possible, because it heavily scales the flat physical damage with spell skill level. So the more spell level we have, the more flat physical it does. And the flat physical it does, it also applies as a debuff to the enemy, so that the next hit we do to the enemy will deal that much physical damage again. So we can fire the Bone Storm on an enemy, and then we fire the Snipe at the enemy, and this flat physical damage is added on the existing base damage, and then the crit multi is applied to it for a massive more damage. Now we can take this whole thing a step further by introducing a Death's Harp to the build. The Death's Harp has a crit damage bonus on the bow itself. Now, on the first thing, or as a PoE1 player, you wouldn't think much of it. It's a neat little thing, we get another 100% crit multi, awesome. Not exactly. For some reason in PoE2, every stat on the bow is considered a base stat. So, base physical damage gets amplified by our increase in more damage multipliers. The base crit chance gets amplified by our increased crit chances. The base attack speed gets amplified by our increased attack speed. And the crit damage bonus on our bow gets amplified by our crit multis. So, our snipe goes from 679 crit damage bonus to 1385 crit damage bonus by swapping in our Death's Harp. And this causes the skill to deal massive amount of damage. Like with 1k crit multi, it's bound to do a lot of damage. But of course, because the Death's Harp is a unique bow with a low flat physical damage, we do need the Bone Storm physical damage that we do have any base damage to multiply with. And that's why Bone Storm is in this setup. Now this already will mean that our single snipe will deal a lot of damage, but we have two more steps to make it even stronger. Introducing Frenzy Charges for single target Barrage. Barrage is a buff that lasts for about 5 seconds, can be scaled with persistence to have more duration to up to 7 seconds, and this means that now we do empower our next attack, repeating it. These repeats are sequential, meaning they can all hit up in a very quick succession. You don't really see it that it's after each other. You don't really see that it's separate projectiles, but it makes you repeat the skill very quickly. So those are a lot of hits in a quick succession. But if you perfectly time your snipe, and then before you activated your snipe, you activated your barrage, this perfectly timed snipe that guarantees crit is getting copied by your barrage. So instead of one perfectly snipe, you have at base level 3 snipes. Now the barrage can consume your frenzy charges, meaning that your 8 frenzy charges will be another 8 copies of your snipe, or if you use the Thrilling Chase load and it procs, you can get up to 16 plus the base 2 up to 18 copies of your snipe, meaning you have 18 perfectly timed snipes. And these 18 perfectly timed snipes will do a massive amount of damage. Now, of course, these are sequential, so one thing we can abuse here is our only source of armor break, which is Splinter. Using this on your snipe means that the first 1 to 3 snipes will chunk away at the armor of the enemy, so the other snipes will deal even more damage as they don't need to get mitigated by the armor anymore, meaning even more damage. Now, in all honesty, I only tested this on map bosses, and map bosses with this setup, if it works out, if you time your snipe perfectly, you use the barrage support, they get nuked. They get absolutely annihilated. But we can scale this one step further. I don't even, with the Splinter already, it's a lot. But we can do one more thing. Tornado Shot places a tornado. This tornado, if we hit it, will cause the projectile to split into 3 directions and be 3 more projectiles. Now with Death's Harp and Barrage, the Barrage projectiles are sequential and can hit the same enemy. But Death's Harp adds 4 additional arrows to each attack. So what's happening is, is that now you're firing 5 arrows with each attack, but only one of these 5 arrows can hit a single enemy, because this skill doesn't shotgun. But what happens is, if we place a tornado behind the boss, and we then hit that tornado with the snipe, one hit goes on the boss and the others go past the boss and hit the tornado, then split, and from the 2 tornadoes, with overabundance there too, hit back and hit the boss again. Meaning that now this tornado will cause another 2 hits with each of our barrage attacks for even more single target burst. And this is the maximum amount of single target I think we can get, and this should nuke every enemy in the game if the setup is done completely. Keep in mind that with 18 hits with barrage, we will be needing 18 bone storm debuffs on the boss. So you need, on pinnacle bosses, the only melee bosses where it matters, you need to charge your bone storm a little bit more than just one quick tap to get 1 or 2 splinters into the enemies. But this much to that. I will very quickly cover the most important notes on gear and on the gem setups. The passive tree is in the written guide. There isn't really much we need to say here. The weapon swap is needed for the intelligence for the bone storm, and all we really care: quiver effect, as much evasion rating as we can get, as much frenzy charges as we can get, and a lot of attack speed that we get access to, then a little bit of crit damage and just generic damage that we need to scale so that our crit multi is more efficient on our snipe, and we do at least a good amount of damage with our spiral volley. The most important things on the gems, I would say, is snipe right now works with concentrated effect as to PoE noobs discoveries, so we're using that. We're using splinter because it armor breaks. We're using super critical because we guarantee the crit with snipe, and we're using brutality because we don't care about elemental damage on snipe. For spiral volley, we use pin and cold infusion so we can pin enemies and we can chill enemies. Then we have perpetual charges or charge so that we can retain the frenzy charges, which is really important because sometimes we just want to use snipe a lot, spiral volley a lot, especially on big enemy packs like breaches. And then we have support gems like heft, martial tempo that just do good. And if you want to go a crit route and you gain like some base crit on your bow and you gain a bit of crit chance on your tree, you could also go with ambush here. Then barrage is premedition and ingenuity because it does have some cooldown, and premedition for the more damage, counteracting the less damage with barrage. For the tornado, I added Font of Rage. However, we place it further away than the font can actually affect us, so it's not really any important. We don't really need a third support here. And Bone Storm. Bone Storm is super important. Get as many levels as you can. For our offense swap, we're using a Widow Hail. The Widow Hail with a 2+2 to level of all projectile skills, and a 220% Widow Hail combined with the 80% on the tree gives us +8 level. So we have 80% guaranteed on the tree from passive nodes and 220% for +8. 270% would be +9 and 320% would be +10. This we can only gain from corrupted Widow Hails that when this modifier went up, or we would need to gain jewels or we would need to gain jewels with quiver effect, which went over the budget I had available for this build. Herald of Ice, primal armament, magnified effect, long shot to deal as much damage we can, and that's really about it for the gems. For the gear, the most important things: any good fist bow that deals a good amount of damage. We don't care about the base type, we don't really care about the suffixes, as much fist damage as you can get with the bow. Attack speed is a bonus, life leech is a bonus, life on hit is a bonus. We just care about enough physical damage. Base crit would be neat for spiral volley, but this is again on a higher budget we're talking about. The gloves, I'm using the unique gloves our size because they come with a lot of rarity, and because they're unique we can corrupt them cheaply and we get the +1 frenzy charge. Whole circle ring important, and most important is the body armor. Get as much evasion rating as you can on that body armor. You really need it. It's your main source of evasion rating. Without high evasion rating on the body armor, you have very little evasion rating. The other sources don't even come near it because we have bestial skin on the tree. It is just that important. Do get a good high evasion rating body armor, and then only look secondary life and tertiary look for resistances. And on the belt, we get all the strengths needed for our build. We do need a little bit of strength for support gems, and a little bit of strength to get our life, which is neat, and tiny strengths for the gloves. But that much is needed. We do need a little bit of strength. We get that from our belt, combined with life and more resistances. And then on our helmet, amulet, ring, and boots, we want rares with at least 25% rarity, preferably gold amulet and gold ring base, but also we need to fix the rest of our resistances here, and we need movement speed on the boots, and we want at least 100 life preferably. So we have a lot of stats we want on those. Try to fix the resistances first and get at least 25 rarity, and once resistances are fixed, you can look for more rarity on the last spot. So first get helmet and boots, get as much resistances on top of the rarity, movement speed, and life as you can have. And then get the ring with fixing the last bit of resistances, life, and rarity. And finally get the amulet with as much rarity, because gold amulet has the highest rarity base. We then can combine this with more rarity for even more rarity. Lastly, the quiver, fist damage, bow skills, bow projectile speed, crit damage multi, but most importantly, life gained on kill. Life per enemy killed, really important to counteract the hour size, so we don't need to use jewels for that. So that our jewels, we can use evasion, projectile speed, or attack damage, attack speed with both or normal attack speed, and then either pin build up, or blind, or any flexible on the last one. Keep in mind that I really tried to go cheap with this build, and it has a lot of potential upwards. But I really didn't want to make the video longer than it had to be. There's nothing really too complex going on with the gear, gems, or passive tree after the initial ones mentioned earlier in the video. So all this being said, if this guide was helpful, I would highly appreciate a thumbs up. If I forgot anything, do ask please. It also helps me fix it so that other people don't have the same question marks as you have. And also, if you haven't yet and you still watch till now, I would highly appreciate a subscribe to the channel. Helps me grow, it helps me reach more people that my guides are helpful to. All this being said, have a wonderful day, goodbye.